Hello, I'm Ruth Brenner, and I have the privilege of interviewing today Connie Hill and Sandy Lee here in Severance, Colorado. They're longtime residents, and so are their parents. And we are at Lake Drive, and the date is August 12th, 2020. So would you go ahead and introduce yourself to the camera? And the Windsor Severance Historical Society is collecting these oral histories for people to learn about the history of their town. So anything you want to add about that is our goal for the day.
I'm Connie Hill, and I have lived in this area most of the time, actually. I was gone for some teaching jobs, but came back here to this area in 1989, and have lived here ever since. Different houses, but that's, yeah.
Oh, and I'm Sandy Lindblad Lee, and our parents were Virginia and Mary Alice Lindblad, and Mary Alice, excuse me, that's wrong. Edit. And our parents were Virginia and Leonard Lindblad.
Okay.
And anyway, Dad's father came here from Sweden. He was an immigrant from Sweden, so, and he didn't even know English at all when he came here. So, and he was one of the few Swedes actually in the area. Most people were German and Russian, that area, but more of the Swedes settled in Eton. So his dad came here in 1904, and then from Mom's side, her mother's.
We think she's English.
Yeah.
Right, we think that that's what she was. We got some differing information that said that she might have been German, but her spelling of her name was Snider, so we didn't know for sure. We have to look that up, I guess. Yeah.
But anyway, on our grandfather's side, it was his family that's one of the original Union Colony settlers, and they came here in 1869 to Greeley area, actually about a quarter of a mile east of where I live, which is 5 miles east of Windsor, and they homesteaded there. And I still live in that area. My house is quarter of a mile west of where they originally homesteaded. So
Wow, that's quite a tradition. That's quite a tradition. You know, with Severance's 100-year anniversary, you've seen a lot of changes, and your families were part of that. So, this is interesting. Shows the book here that you have in front. Yeah.
can you get that?
Yeah. And it's written by
Annie Green, and it says Mrs. A.M. Green here, but she was our great-great-grandmother. And it's 16 years in the Great American Desert, the trials and triumphs of frontier life. And the reason they called it the Great American Desert is because that's before there was irrigating in Weld County, before they brought water down from the mountains. And it truly was a desert. It was horrible. She hated it when she first moved here, absolutely hated it. But she grew to love it, and they settled here, and we're here. And as a result of that, and more generations lived here.
Was she from Sweden?
No, this one was the one
on the other side.
On the other side,
Pennsylvania. Yeah, she came from Pennsylvania.
Lush country.
And on that side of our family, our relatives, one of them fought in the Revolutionary War. So
that's what we were part of the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution. Mom and Annie Morales worked hard for us to get us in that group because they thought that was important, and we do too. Yeah.
You have to be a descendant of someone who fought in the Revolutionary War to be in that. So,
Yeah.
And she did talk in here. She has a lot of poetry in here, and she also talked a lot about the Dust Bowl and how terrified she was, how hard it was with the kids that she had, and she was left alone a lot of the time because her husband was out. Either he was gone working, trying to work the fields or something like that, and she was by herself. He was off, getting supplies, and she had really a rough time before she settled in Greeley. So,
and one of her sons was one of the fourth or fifth mayor of Greeley, original.
Greeley.
Yeah.
and they have that picture. It's kind of like a panorama on Reservoir Road, and his picture is there.
Our great Uncle Frank. That was the name.
Great
Uncle Frank Rice. He was one of the mayors of Greeley.
Right. So now, tell us about, because your mother's married brothers, right?
They did, and
They both lived on the Lindblad farm, which is a mile north of here, and we grew up there. And we have lots of stories of our cousins who lived just right in the same yard. And they always got along really well. That was a
both Mary
Yeah.
Alice and Virginia, as well as Uncle Bib. We called him Bib. His
They
name
were
was
just
Vernon.
best friends.
And Dad was Leonard.
Yeah.
But yes, Annie Mary Alice and Uncle Bib met under a table at a 4-H meeting. And they knew each other for 9 years before they even were engaged. But they introduced Mom and Dad, and they were on a blind date. And 2.5 months later, when Mom and Dad were engaged.
So the 4-H has been a big part of Severance. What was? I mean, I know that's. So
We had what was it called? The Severance Nimble Fingers. We were part of that group. That was the girls' 4-H, and then I think they just called it.
Ag. I think
Was
they
it
called
just
Severance
ag?
yeah.
The boys' 4-H was that, and it was quite lots of people.
Very active.
Yeah, and we remember that we spent all day Wednesdays in the summertime doing our projects and fixing food for all the people that the girls that were there, and we did that at a place that's over. Oh, you're it's a wasp right there. Sorry, that was. Is the Severance Community Church now?
Yes.
Yes. And
Across
so-
from Bruce's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That was where we used to have the 4-H meetings.
Yeah.
Yes.
and that was a fun time in our lives, really. And they expected us to finish our projects, no matter how many projects we had to do. And some of us took 3, some of us got smart and only took 2 or so you wouldn't have so much to do in the summer.
Projects
But-
meaning home furnishings, cooking, sewing,
Knitting.
knitting, different things like that. So different projects.
And didn't you keep a lot of records for 4-H?
Yes.
And
Oh,
the
yes.
things that you learned from that, I think, serve you well in life.
Oh, you bet.
It does.
Sandy
yes.
has talked about a number of times about her a junior leader, and that how much she appreciated that. I wasn't as active in that, but you met a lot of people through that.
Junior leadership, and
Yeah.
I've had lifelong friends still that I met through 4-H, but that was throughout the county and the state too, not just the town.
So does Severance still have an active 4-H group?
They do. I think it's one group that's co-ed. It used to be the girls could join the boys 4-H, but the boys didn't want to join the girls because the girls would show sheep and cows and stuff too. But now they have one club. I'm just not sure the name, but they do.
And I didn't even know that they had it. I didn't know it. I thought maybe it had dissolved. Casey, my son, was part of the club that was combination Severance and Windsor, and Joyce and Bev Ehrlich, they were Ehrlichs, and they lived up north of us. They ran that for a while, but I don't know if maybe we're talking about 2 different clubs. But Casey was in that one. He did rocket ship, and it seems like there was something else he did.
Woodworking?
Electricity.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they 4-H has progressed. Now let's go back to when your parents met and dated, did they ever talk about the early life in Severance and what Severance was like? Was that probably when they court in the 40s, 30s?
Let's see. That would have been because Dad was born in 1918 and Mom was born in 1922. So that they would have been, well, they married in 47.
Okay.
I think that's correct. So at that time there was a Severance Inn, which was a bar, but I think before that it was a bank. And then across from it there was that was a place, and I always thought it was a hardware shop, but it was our place where our grandfather used that part to, he was intending to be a cabinet maker when he came over from Sweden, and there just wasn't the business for that, and so he went ahead and decided that he would go ahead and find a place to help on a farm, and then he just farmed from there on. But he was doing that kind of on the side, and so that's where he kept a lot of his supplies. And I think that was partially, he had some other things going on in there too. You know, other people kept supplies there or something, because I remember going in there, and there were things besides what you would put in cabinets, I'm just sure.
And
So-
even back as late as the 1980s, that building was still there, and it's
Yeah.
not right north of Bruce's.
Yes.
It was grandfather's
Yeah.
cabinet shop. So.
Yes, I remember that.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So, okay.
But yeah, he had that, and then
There was a church, a Baptist church, that was over here, pretty close to where my subdivision is, on Road 23, and that was in the place of where Bruce's bar, the first Bruce of Bruce's bar used to live, and now the second Bruce of Bruce's bar lives, and that was there, and it was not active, I don't think, when we were growing up. Maybe it was, but
the church itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Dad used to say it was an interdenominational church.
and they had immersion baptism, because we had gone in there to look at that, because you could see that. So that
was right
interesting.
right north of where Ross's lived for years. You know.
Okay, Ernie Ross.
And that was the teacherage for
Yeah.
Severance.
Yes.
You've heard that before too, right?
Yes.
Right
that-
west of that was the Severance School.
That was this, and the school, I've seen pictures of it, but what sits on that corner now, and it's catty corner from Bruce's bar on the, what would be the southeast corner, was
It's
where the
kind of-
school was? Is
It was
that right?
almost due west, really, of
Of the teacherage.
Ross's, where
Okay,
the
due
teacherage
west.
was.
Okay,
yes.
it was further back. Okay, due west.
Yeah.
All right. And did your parents go to school there?
Yeah, actually,
Well,
our
not
mom
Mom.
went to Bracewell School
Okay.
through the 8th grade. But Dad went to Severance School through 8th grade, but then he went to Eton after that, to high school, graduated from Eton High School. And then Mom went to Bracewell through 8th grade and graduated from Windsor in 1939.
It's hard to imagine that Bracewell had a school.
They
Oh, my
did,
goodness.
yeah, right. They're in that corner. That's a house now, you know, but there's a school in that area too.
Did they tell stories of things they remember as a child, or did they take you down memory lane?
Yeah,
or-
well, they said Mom always had a famous story about how they had to walk to school, and one night morning they were walking to school in a dress, because that's what they did, was wear dresses then. That's how they always wore dresses. And it was really, really cold. And one of their neighbors stopped by and said, "I am not going to take you to school. You're going to have to walk yourself, because you shouldn't be wearing a dress to school when it's this cold." And he pulled out and made him walk anyway. That's one of the famous stories she always said. So.
Just going to toughen you girls up.
yeah. So, but they did, yes, a lot of different stories. The Emersons were their neighbors, and they would walk to school with them too.
Yeah. How far of a walk was that?
Well, it's where I live now, where Mom grew up, and they literally.
Probably at least 3 miles, don't you think?
Yeah,
Maybe two and
I
a
think
half.
3.
No
They
school
went around the
buses?
ditch, probably.
No
They didn't
school
have
bus?
buses then. No, either somebody
Yeah.
drove them or else they walked. Yeah.
And as far as Severance School, I remember that there were necessarily a lot of, we knew a lot of stories, but Dad and Uncle Bill, I mean, they had 3 sisters, and then there were the 3 brothers. And so all of them went to that school. And so I think that was an accomplishment. And then nearly all of them, we thought, is really good. Most of them were teachers. Nearly all of them went to college, and that was something, because both of their parents came over and couldn't speak a bit of English when they got here.
They spoke Swedish in the home and English in school.
In
Yeah.
English in school.
And
Do
then
you
I'm
remember
sure
any of their Swedish sayings that they would say to you now?
A few.
the only thing we know is dupagrita.
Yeah. And Jaihuk means I am sick, but
Yeah.
that's just a few like that.
Yeah. And
Skull.
that other one is dip in the
Skull.
pot. Yeah.
Skull.
One is, and so we do that every Christmas as a tradition. We still do that, and just it's sausage that's boiled.
The dupagrita thing.
Yeah. And then rye bread, and you just pour the sausage on you put the sausage on the bread and pour the broth on there.
And the tradition with that was in Sweden, they started it because poor people were so poor in the region where they would live that they'd have a little sausage but a lot of broth. So they just keep the sausage in there, and people would bring their bread and dip the broth, dip the bread in the broth, so they could feed a lot more people that way.
Wow. Wow. So, I knew both of your mothers as teachers. So, you want to tell us a little bit about each of them and some of the things they did as educators in Windsor?
Aunt Mary Alice and Mom. you mean?
Librarians and teachers and...
Yeah, we have the same mother, but Aunt
Yeah.
Mary Alice is
Yeah.
hers.
Yeah, right.
So.
Yeah. Aunt Mary Alice was an American Problems teacher, and so she knew, I mean, she was very interested in history. I had her, she was transitioning at that point into being a librarian. But she did a lot. I thought it was what she did. I thought that they were both, Mom and Aunt Mary Alice, were really good teachers, because she did a lot of activities. And I think, rather than passing out a bunch of papers and having worksheets and things like that, the kids we had a mock trial, we had a mock Senate. All those things I remember because they were way more active than a lot of times they were at that time.
And American Problems is now called U.S. Government and Civics at the high school. So you get an idea of what that is. The same class, they just call it that now. So.
And it was just she did a great job. She did. And then Mom was, what I remember from Mom was Shakespeare, of course. And I think Mom used to get a lot of comments about her Shakespeare classes and how kids thought that when she introduced the Shakespeare class, and they thought they weren't going to like it at all, and then because of the way she taught it, that they really remembered that one thing more than they remembered nearly anything else. Also, she did really well with grammar.
And she was a good journalism teacher. I went on to become a writer, a journalist. Connie went on to become an English teacher, so we both took after our mom. I went on to become an ag journalist, which takes after my dad, too.
So we're just thankful that they were as articulate as they were, so that they could...
Then those are the words we got more than anything else when people sent sympathy cards when Mom recently passed, was what a good teacher she was. So we appreciate that.
And they still remembered it because she retired from teaching in what year?
1983.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did she name a wing after her on the Severance School or Windsor School?
Oh, yeah, we would think that would be nice if they would.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, because I know that now. Mary Alice, the writer of the books.
Yes.
What was the story of that?
After she retired, she decided to take on a whole new career, really, and since she was such a historian, she decided to do... Roy Ray wrote the history of Windsor up to 1940, and she wrote 1940 to 1980. So this is the Severance one. Sorry.
This one has the
There's the walk through Windsor,
Windsor,
1940 to 1980.
Yeah, and you can check that out at Windsor Library. I know my students have used it for their research.
Oh, good.
Windsor that. So are you going to write the next book on Windsor history?
Yeah, she probably like it.
Us that, yeah. This was also something that she put into the Beacon, and was called Walk into the Past. It was a lot of stories about her.
The articles that were wonderful.
Yeah, lots of more personal information. So that was another thing I thought was really a good thing.
Yeah.
And then after that, she wrote the Tales of the story of Severance. And
so what's one that you remember from that? Because I've not read that book. And it's
a lot of it is listing things like historical
records.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a picture of the Severance School and all the teachers were listed.
Yeah, so she did a lot of listing with that.
And how it became a town.
What's the story of that?
The Tailholt thing, and now they use that name now. It's back.
As
the name
a
of that
subdivision
over there.
Yeah, this one across the street from this one. Yeah, now that would be a good question. I don't remember.
Because we're not sure what Tailholt... We've had people ask us. But then here's the history of Bruce's Bar, one chapter. You asked about one chapter?
Yeah.
She asked me to write it. So I wrote the history of Bruce's Bar.
Okay.
It is, yes. So, because I worked for Bruce when I was in college a little bit, and then after. So.
Very unfair, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, that really is probably the most prominent landmark still of Severance,
Well, yeah.
With the history.
What do you remember working for Bruce at Bruce's Bar?
He was a very notorious individual, but he also was very, very generous. He just was very, notorious. He did operate. You know, his family is not around anymore. I guess for a while he operated like a craps table in the back room of Bruce's for a while. He did that up at the Kersey Bar. I know he had that too. He was quite the character.
Well, and he had a lot of power in the town too, because when my ex-husband and I moved into town, he came by one day and said to us, we have a town meeting going on, and he said, I expect you to vote this way, because you know that the trailer that's next to you, that was something that I voted for, and I got, that was okay to have a trailer next to your house. That was an ordinance. So, yes, because so I thought,
Politics
whoa.
at its best in Severance, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He
I did you this favor, so you do me that favor, in
Uh-huh.
other words, yeah.
Quid pro quo.
But again, like if you're talking about Bruce, though, he was, like I said, notorious in that way, and he tells stories that sometimes you could hardly believe, but were true. But he also did things like, he was such a philanthropic person, you know, he ran the Easter egg hunt at Severance and Easter, and he was very generous. Some of his employees, a couple of them, he gave them their home, and they still live in their home now that they gave him.
That's true.
So,
They got started with him, and they've kept
they
up
stayed.
as a cook. I remember cooks. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Dennis Guffey owns that home and another home just because
Because
Bruce
of
gave it
Bruce's.
to him.
Yeah.
didn't he have duck blinds, and people would come up to hunt in the duck blinds, and he had a place to keep, or goose, or what?
Yeah.
He did, yeah. He ran a really
dress the
big,
goose. Yeah,
a
the
really
geese.
big goose
Yeah.
hunters headquarters. They used to call it, you know. And he also rented Timnath Lake and had goose blinds all over the northern Colorado. So he had the service at the end of the day too, that he would clean the geese for you. Not him personally, but his employees would.
Yeah.
So he had quite a business going there. It was really busy during goose season, definitely. Breakfast, lunch, dinner.
And they did have a lot of
invited,
goose blinds around where the guy that lives on the hill, the one that's over there by the reservoir, there were lots of goose blinds in that area. That was something he ran also, or at least he had help running that. Yeah.
Leasing and that. So.
Yeah.
You're talking about Howard Smith, not what guy on the hill? Okay, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Now it's
Yeah, I can't remember the guy's
now
name.
it's Jada Moskey's house.
You can edit that out because we can't remember the name.
You know, when I was editor of the Northwell Herald for about a year and a half, which is the Eaton paper, I told him I wanted to do a story on opening day. So I got up at about 4 o'clock, met him here, went out to his goose blind, got in his goose blind. It had a couch. It had a full bar in the goose blind below
my
the
goodness.
ground. It was amazing. So people were, you know, there were goose blinds around that area too, and they could come over and get a drink if they wanted to.
That must have been a bigger one.
Yeah, but not huge. It was pretty, you know, compact, all the stuff he had in there.
What year was that?
1981.
So,
80 and 81 is when I was editor of that, yeah.
And there used to be Ducks Unlimited and those different things that Bruce would sponsor. And
Yeah, I
and
think
different
Ducks
things.
Unlimited is still active, but I don't know
Okay.
much about it.
So, you've seen changes. What do you think people need to know about the past of Severance to move forward in these, what we call pandemic times of 2020? And what values have you learned and garnished from your family and people that you knew in Severance that you hope moves forward?
Well, I would say one thing is that I think land is important, farmland, and I feel nostalgic every time I see another house going up, and I know that sounds like I'm old, but it just seems like the heritage of the farm is kind of being lost, and so Sandy and I plan to keep the farm that is close to Severance. Ours is a mile north of Severance, as long as we can as a farm rather than as a subdivision. So that would be something that I feel is important as we see this growth in Severance just amazing me.
And as far as changes, when I was in high school, and when Connie was too, she's 6 years older than I am. So we
You're
stand
supposed to
pretty
tell
good.
me your age.
Yeah,
You should know that. But
okay. Anyway, it was population 74 basically, and it didn't change much by the time I got to high school. It was pretty
It
much
was
that.
97 on that sign when we moved in in
Okay.
89.
So it went in 89 from 97 to what it is today, which is what?
Oh, I think it's 6,000 something.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
just
even
that
more.
that change. To watch that's been amazing.
So what do you wish wasn't happening?
Oh yeah. As far as what Connie said too, I feel like agriculture is the heart of our nation, really, and we're losing some of the heart of the nation, and it's too bad. We got to try to preserve that as much as possible.
And I agree with Sandy. I mean, you see that. I mean, it's so fun to see the sprinklers and all of the, the big sprinklers and all of the irrigation and things like that, and all of the crops when they're ready. It's just something that we just see less and less of, because that's progress, I guess you want to call it.
It's the economics too.
Yeah.
So what kind of values did you learn from your parents? Were you churchgoers, or family rituals, traditions?
Definitely church goers. Well, I went all the way through. We were always in Sunday school and church all the way through.
We did.
Went to the Windsor Methodist Church.
We had always remember this story. For some reason, I mean, Sandy and I, since we were 6 years apart, we didn't get along always. And so we were at church one time, and Mom and Dad were there, and afterwards they had told us that they were terribly embarrassed about our behavior. But even with somebody, I don't know what we were doing, we were just not getting along and not paying attention. And somebody from the church, whose name was Harlan Branch, came up and said, "What in the world were you girls doing this time during church service?" And so, yes, we did not, or at least Mom and Dad did not receive that very well.
And the values we were taught as a result of that, to be respectful and to your
and,
parents and your
remembering
family.
something like that, you just think, oh my gosh, church is very important. You have to be very quiet if you want to attend. So, and I think honesty was another thing that I would say that we were taught. Being, I think, telling the truth, which is honesty, being also kind.
And generosity. We
Yeah.
definitely learned that a lot from them. Didn't do it as well as they did, but they were always the first people. If someone was sick or a death in the family or whatever, they'd always be the first person to take them a casserole. That.
And they got that, I think, from our grandmother Rice, because she was one that she would feed all of the people that worked for Grandpa Rice when they had harvest, and so she cooked like crazy. And just to do that, I think that would be really, I don't know whether I could do that. Day after day, all during harvest season, just would be, or just planting season. I think that would be really hard
to cook big meals every single day. That's what the farm.
And they learned
do.
that. Mom and Eddie Morales learned that for sure. I think that on the Lindblad side, I think they learned, what would you call it, being tolerant of other people. I mean, because they felt ostracized when they came, because the Swedish people, I mean, there were so many Germans that didn't get along with the Swedish people, I mean, at first, and then Swedish people were called dumb Swedes. So, but they, I suppose because they didn't know the language at that time, but I think tolerance was something that they taught us as well. So.
And the importance of family were another big thing that we did. We used to always make sure to get together at birthdays with cousins and stuff, and that's been lost through the generations with everybody really that we talked to. A lot of families that used to get together so much more, and they just kind of lost. But
we have started up a cousins gathering with most of the cousins, and that includes Sandy's family and my family, and then it's actually Gary's two kids and their families, and they come. So I think it's nice that
try to keep getting together as a family.
Right.
Maybe
It's called
just part of
cousins. We just call it cousins gathering. And it's nice. So
Okay, so you both went to Windsor High School?
yes.
Okay, and what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1968.
And I was 1974.
74 and 68. So what was Windsor High School like at that time?
Well, I went.
You went to the old one.
I
Yeah.
did. I went to the junior
That's
high,
the
and then
junior.
I went when it got. I mean, I was going to go to the junior high. I went in 7th and 8th grade, and then that was when it burned down.
Uh-huh.
So I went to the barracks. That was an experience.
Temporary
Yes.
buildings.
Oh, tell us
Yeah.
about that. Yeah.
Um,
They were brought in from Cheyenne. They
I
were
don't
left-
know.
That's what Arlen Kaler said.
Did he?
Is that
they're-
right?
I remember they were white, and they looked like a temporary building like they have now, but it was interesting.
did Mr. Kaler say how many buildings there were?
No, but if it was hot out, it was hot inside. If it was cold out, it was cold
Oh.
inside. They were not well built, and but that's how you had to have school till
Yeah.
the new
They only
addition was
had
built
just
on.
And I remember just the
Old
steps up to them. I remember going in there. I do remember various teachers that my first French teacher, I remembered her husband kept a monkey inside the barracks. I don't know quite.
A live one?
Yes, he had this monkey, and I couldn't quite figure out why that was. I think maybe he was a science teacher. She was the French teacher, but and there was this monkey, and then we had Mrs. McCall, and so she was quite, she carried on even with the barracks.
Yes.
I'll tell you. And I remember Shakespeare from her, and giving speeches. We had to give 2 speeches every 6 weeks, and those. I remember those because I never liked giving speeches. They made me nervous. But that was some way of you learned.
You
just
learned, yeah. Yeah, the organ.
It's something you do your whole life. You just give speeches, really.
So the fire was in May of 65, is that right? I think.
I think so. Yeah.
And it was rags that were
Yes,
painting oil rags or something.
That's
so.
what
Well,
they
and that
traced
whole-
it to as a closet. Yeah.
They had to rebuild that whole side, and now where your room used to be, that was the high school, and that's the barracks and the high school, and then they built that whole other wing, and eventually that's where they keep expanding in Windsor Middle School.
I think my first room at Windsor Middle School was Mr. McCall's old office.
Oh,
It was
really?
just- yeah, the kids
Oh.
had to walk on the chairs to find a seat. It was so small, they had so many chairs in there. But it was where the stairway used to be off
Okay.
of Main Street, and then they put the elevator shaft there. So that's, that.
Well, and Mom had a room down there at the pit area. That's what they called it, the pit. They had Mr. Maury's room was down there for art
And the
Mom's. Yeah, and
Was
the
it old
pit.
gym?
That's what they
Yeah.
called the pit. And that they finally eventually turned that into a wrestling room. I guess all that is they don't use it anymore, right? Still
No.
asbestos.
Asbestos and not enough fire exits since
Oh.
the elevators were put
Oh.
in, and then they need sprinkler systems, and
Okay.
there's probably asbestos in lots of places. But so then you went to the. Did you go?
My class was the last class to graduate from the old
Old-
Windsor Senior High School.
Okay.
Because in January of
74.
'75 they moved over to
That's-
the new high school.
It was
So
January of 75.
Yeah, so they went 4 months after I graduated and went on to CSU, but they were there for the fall season, and then they moved in January of '75. So I never actually went to that school. That as far as getting my education there.
And those barracks, whatever, that are east of the high school, the old high school, did you go? That one, Mom taught in those too.
Yeah, they
And-
set up
but-
where then it later became tennis courts. The
Yeah.
area where they had 4 rooms. They had I guess they called them barracks then too, or just modulars.
Yeah, modulars probably.
But there were 4
did you
rooms.
have her
Mr.
then?
Shiley, Mr. Denson, Mom, and
Oh, yeah, Mr.
maybe Mr. Dudley was in there, but I know Mr. Shiley and Mr. Denson were.
And was
Sounds like
that
4 rooms.
the pretty stringent teacher.